It's April 12th, 1961. A Soviet rocket roars to life, carrying a single passenger, Yuri Gagarin, seated inside a tiny metal capsule barely bigger than a car. In just minutes, he becomes the first human to leave Earth, hurtling through space at over 17,000 miles per hour. No one knows exactly what will happen. Only thin walls separate him from the void of space. Will his fragile spacecraft survive the blazing return to Earth? Will his body endure the stress of weightlessness? For 108 heart-pounding minutes, he orbits the planet, a lone traveler in the great unknown. Then, against all uncertainty, he returns safely, proving that humans can venture beyond Earth. Hold up, he returned safely in that tiny ball? Wow, that's impressive. But that feat didn't happen magically. It was the result of years of scientific breakthroughs, rocket tests, and an intensifying space race between nations. And reaching orbit was just the beginning. In the decades that followed, astronauts and engineers would take on even greater challenges, walking on the moon, building reusable spacecraft, and learning how to survive in space for months at a time. Every mission carried risks. Every success and every failure shaped the future of spaceflight. So, how did we get from that first daring flight to astronauts living aboard space stations? And how did space exploration evolve from a high-stakes competition into a shared human endeavor? Let's retrace the milestones that defined human space exploration. Before humans could reach space, we had to solve a fundamental challenge. How do we get there? The first major step came in 1957 when the Soviet Union launched Sputnik 1, the world's first artificial satellite. The small metal sphere, just 23 inches across, didn't do much. It didn't carry instruments or cameras. It simply transmitted a steady radio signal as it orbited Earth. But that simple beep, beep, beep sent shockwaves around the world. Reaching space was no longer just theory. It was real. The United States responded swiftly. In 1958, it launched its own satellite and established NASA to lead the nation's space efforts. The space race between the United States and the Soviet Union was officially underway. Both nations began racing toward the same goal: sending a human into space. Why do you think that spaceflight was such a high priority for these nations? Was it only about science, or was something else driving the competition? Pause the video and record your thoughts in your guided notes. While space exploration was an incredible scientific challenge, the space race wasn't just about discovery. The United States and the Soviet Union were in the middle of the Cold War, a competition for global influence, military superiority, and technological dominance. Space became a new frontier where each side wanted to prove its power and capability. Every mission was more than just a scientific breakthrough. It was a statement to the world. But sending a human into space is more complicated than launching a satellite. Scientists needed to test how space travel would affect the human body. Over the next few years, both the US and the Soviet Union launched a series of missions to study space flight's effects on living organisms, gathering critical data for future astronauts. On April 12, 1961, the Soviet Union reached the goal first. Yuri Gagarin became the first human in space. He orbited Earth and returned safely, proving it was possible to leave our planet and survive. Less than a month later, the United States launched Alan Shepard. His flight lasted only 15 minutes and didn't reach orbit, but it was a crucial step forward. Within a year, John Glenn became the first American to orbit the Earth, cementing the United States as a serious competitor in space. At this point, the space race had entered a new phase. Now, the challenge wasn't just getting there, it was going farther. The next goal? Landing on the moon. With both nations having successfully sent humans into space, they now set their sights on a lunar landing. In 1961, President John F. Kennedy announced a bold goal: land a man on the moon and return him safely to Earth before the decade was out. In response, NASA launched the Apollo program. But progress came at a cost. In 1967, tragedy struck. During a pre-flight test, a fire inside the Apollo 1 command module claimed the lives of 3 astronauts. It was a stark reminder that space exploration carried real risks. The disaster was a huge setback, but NASA didn't give up. They improved spacecraft safety, and with each mission, they got one step closer to landing on the moon. Apollo 7 tested the command module in Earth's orbit. Apollo 8 became the first crewed mission to orbit the moon, giving humanity its first glimpse of Earth rising over the lunar surface. And then came Apollo 11, the mission that changed history. On July 20th, 1969, astronauts Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin stepped onto the lunar surface while Michael Collins remained in orbit above. Armstrong's words, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind," echoed across the world. Why do you think the moon landing mattered to people all over the world, not just the United States? While the Apollo program was led by the United States, the moon landing was a triumph for all of humanity. It symbolized what humanity could accomplish through science and determination. It showed that space was no longer out of reach. But the Apollo program didn't stop there. 5 more successful moon landings followed. In just a few short years, Apollo transformed the impossible into reality. It gave us new knowledge of the moon, iconic images of Earth, and a legacy of innovation that would shape space exploration for decades to come. But now that we had reached the moon, a new question emerged. What comes next? By 1972, the Apollo program had come to an end. NASA had landed astronauts on the moon 6 times, but after Apollo 17, no further missions took place. It wasn't because Apollo had failed. It had accomplished its goal. However, public interest started to fade and priorities shifted. Why do you think the interest in moon landings faded? Well, at first, the moon landings amazed people, but soon they felt routine. Each mission looked similar to the last. People turned their attention to other issues on Earth. Additionally, moon missions were expensive. With rising costs and shifting priorities, support for the program faded. With Apollo behind them, NASA faced a new challenge: how to stay in space. Their solution? The Space Shuttle. Unlike earlier spacecraft, which could only be used once, the shuttle was reusable. Why do you think reusability was such an important step for spaceflight? Pause the video and make a prediction. A reusable spacecraft meant more frequent missions at a lower cost, expanding our ability to conduct experiments and test new technology. The shuttle program officially began in 1981 with the launch of Columbia. Space shuttles didn't go to the moon. They stayed closer to home in an orbit around Earth, completing critically important work. Over the next 30 years, NASA's 5 space shuttles completed 135 missions, deploying satellites, conducting science experiments, and even repairing the Hubble Space Telescope. The shuttles also played a critical role in the building of the International Space Station. Shuttle crews transported critical parts, conducted spacewalks, and helped transform the space station from a concept into a fully functioning research laboratory in orbit. But the shuttle program did more than expand human presence in space. It turned spaceflight from a national pursuit into a global effort. Unlike the early space race when nations competed to outdo one another, the shuttle regularly carried astronauts from around the world. For the first time, space exploration was about collaboration, not rivalry. But spaceflight remained dangerous. In 1986, Challenger exploded just after liftoff. Then in 2003, Columbia broke apart during re-entry. These tragedies reinforced the difficulties and dangers of human spaceflight. Even in the face of loss, the spirit of exploration has never faded. Scientists and engineers work tirelessly to improve spacecraft and keep the dream of spaceflight alive. After 3 decades, the shuttle program came to an end with its final mission in 2011. Its legacy? A research station orbiting Earth, a new era of international cooperation, and a deeper understanding of long-term spaceflight. But just like at the end of the Apollo program, the question emerged: what comes next? The retirement of the space shuttle marked the end of an era, but not the end of human spaceflight. Since then, NASA and space agencies around the world have shifted their focus to new frontiers: deep space exploration, commercial spaceflight, and missions beyond Earth's orbit. During this unit, we'll be exploring each of these topics in more detail. Every breakthrough builds on the ones before it, bringing us closer to answering some of humanity's biggest questions. Could we live on other planets? What's beyond our solar system? And how far can we really go? The journey of human spaceflight isn't over. It's only just beginning.
Hey, hey.